If you are here, you have taken an active role in bettering your life, no matter what stage of life you are in. The Banyan Treatment Center's podcast will discuss many topics like recovery, addiction, self-help, mental health, and so much more. It will provide you with tools to succeed, ideas for recovering, and how-tos on creating a better life. My name is Alyssa, and today's episode is about faith-based treatment. Today on our panel, we have Anthony Acampora, the chaplain and national director of faith-based services at Banyan Treatment Centers. Anthony is a published author of 3 books, a national speaker, and a writer with articles published in numerous international magazines. He has appeared on television and hosted radio shows airing in both Orlando, Florida, and Atlanta, Georgia. Anthony, thank you so much for joining us today. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Great to be here. Thank you, Alyssa. I got in the industry of recovery and mental health around 2014, and it had to do with going through a lot of this stuff myself. Prior to that, I was in the investigation and security field for about 18 years, which no one believes because I look like I'm like 24 now. So I ended up going through a lot of this stuff, and my heart started to change. I started to develop a compassion that I didn't have before for people that were suffering with addiction and or mental health disorders. So that's kind of how it happens. And I'm really blessed that it had, because it changed who I am. And I just said this yesterday in the coin out. I get calls sometimes and people are like, why don't you get back into corporate security? You know, what are you doing there? And they think I'm crazy. And to me, it's not crazy, because I said it in the coin out. This is more rewarding in the coin out yesterday for an hour than maybe years of being in investigations. So that's why I do it.
Making a change, it's emotionally fulfilling.
Yeah.
According to a Gallup polling, about 3 in 4 Americans said they identify with a specific religious faith. By far the largest proportion, 69%, identify with a Christian religion. When it comes to struggling with addiction and mental illness, many of those who initially identified with religious beliefs often get discouraged and can even begin to denounce God because of their disease. Restoring your connection with faith can play a pivotal role in your recovery journey. So why is faith so important in recovery? Today, we'll be discussing the Faith in Recovery program at Banyan, along with ways that you can strengthen your relationship with God while navigating obstacles in recovery. So, Anthony, what has faith done for your life personally?
Wow, that's a great question. So I was very much about self, right? And that's usually what happens. It was about the next level. I remember I used to talk to this recruiter. We used to get recruited a lot in the security investigation field. It's called loss prevention. And as soon as I got a regional position, I remember talking to her, because I used to talk to her all the time. Where's the director positions? It was never enough. And so, I was trying to fill a void, a spiritual void, they call it a God-shaped hole, with things, with titles, with money, with whatever. And it just wouldn't fill it. So I think the biggest change is, God transforms people's hearts. And it had to do with going through a lot of suffering and pain, depression, anxiety, addictions, and just misery, that I started to change it, and I started to develop a compassion for people who were suffering with similar things. And I think that's what happens. Like, God will allow things to happen, and ultimately he's looking to change us. So he doesn't remove the situation we're in right away. It's going to be in his timing, but he's trying to change our heart. And that's what ended up happening. I worked in Manhattan for 7 years. That culture was crush anybody in front of you.
Yep.
Retaliation. I don't even think I ever heard the word forgiveness. And if I did, it would be looked at as weakness. So I had to kind of unlearn all this and undo all this. And it took a while. I'm still a work in progress. But it's so much different than it was back then. And I think that's the biggest difference of applying biblical principles and trying to deepen a relationship with God.
Yeah, absolutely. And how does faith play a part in recovery? I know this is something like so important that we talk about and encourage people to find.
Yeah. So the 12-step programming, we've probably heard of the Oxford group. It started with the Oxford group, which is part of Ivy League schools, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Oxford, and Oxford group. So it was started by this guy, Frank Buckman, Dr. Frank Buckman, who was a minister. And when Bill Wilson kind of took it on, he distanced himself from the original origins, which was biblical and evangelical. And they wanted to be more inclusive, which makes sense, because if people are struggling and suffering and they don't feel comfortable, why would, they're not going to go.
Right.
So he kind of, I don't know if you call it watered it down or whatever, but it was more inclusive. But the foundation of it, of the 12-step programming, is still the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5, 6, and 7, and also the book of James. So the origins of it in the majority of 12 steps is still that foundation. It's a biblical foundation. And I don't know if anybody knows that or anyone is familiar with that, because it doesn't seem like that, because they're talking about higher powers, and sometimes they don't mention God, or they get upset if you do, or especially if you mention Jesus. So people think like it's not a faith-based program, but it really is. Those were the origins of it. It just got kind of watered down over the years to be more inclusive, which makes sense, because you wouldn't want people not have a place to go if they're suffering with alcohol or drugs or whatever. So
yeah, they use the word higher power for those that are uncomfortable with using the word God at the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've been to many 12-step meetings, and at the end, I don't know if they still do it, but at the end of AA meetings, they used to say the Lord's Prayer.
Yep.
So, I mean, right there, I think AA was a little bit more accepting than maybe NA. I remember I used to go to both. And so, but that's basically where it originated. And so I think that's important for people to realize.
What are some ways someone in recovery can begin strengthening their relationship with God? Do you have like an order of importance, or like what are the tools for success that you suggest to patients?
Yeah, I get this question a lot, and I always go back to, how did we establish a rapport with anyone? And especially in treatment settings, because you get close with people quickly in treatment. And sometimes that works against you depending on the situation. But and if you model that, well, how did you get close with someone? You met them, you've known them for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and then it's like you've known them for 5 years. You're spending a lot of time with them, right? You're starting to be transparent. You're opening up. You're maybe talking about things that you've never talked about before or couldn't talk about, or if you got shamed and stigmatized, so you just kind of shut down. And also, you're starting to trust a little bit. And maybe in some of these people in our program, some of the clients haven't trusted in years, if ever. So if you model that with a relationship with God, the spending time with him, right? Being transparent, because there's no reason not to, because he already knows everything anyway. It's basically coming in agreement with him and asking him to help us with whatever we struggle with, if it's anger, if it's unforgiveness. And once you start doing that and realize he's not against you, he's actually for you, right? And he still loves you unconditionally no matter what we're doing. It's called agape love in the Greek. It's an unconditional love. Then it makes it easier to develop a deeper relationship with God, not just religious rule keeping. That's what I would say with that. Spending time, it's really kind of modeling just any rapport that we've had with people. It's not just surface conversations that are going on usually in treatment centers. It's deep, painful stuff. And you could relate to the people too. They're all there for a reason. There's pain is the common denominator usually, emotional pain. So I think that's the best way to do it. I always say read the Psalms. Psalms come out of a lot of pain and just desperation, especially the ones David wrote. So I always recommend people to read the Psalms, make appointments with God, like we have all these other appointments for everything else. I have like 3 of them in my wallet, dentist, this, and they call us the day before and then we go. So, I mean, make God a priority is really what it is. Because so many times people say, I don't have time. I don't have time to read the Bible. I don't have time to go to church. And, it's not wasted time. It's kind of like, I was never into NASCAR until I became friends with one of the guys. And I remember watching it, and I'm like, they're pulling over. They're doing these pit stops. And I'm like, how the heck are they going to win if they're pulling over? Well, they're not going to finish the race if they don't pull over.
Right.
Because they have to get gas and oil and whatever they do and change the tires. So it's kind of like that spiritually. It's not wasted time because God's going to strengthen us to do whatever we have to do our checklist. right? So that's kind of the way I approach it and what we try to tell the clients.
What are some typical obstacles or fears that you see the patients going through while trying to strengthen a relationship with God?
I think it's the trust factor, especially, you're coming out of a world of mistrust in active addiction most of the time. Some worse than others, but for the most part, trust is a big issue. In particular, if you had issues with your own father, right? I don't know how many clients that we've had that hate God, and we start talking to them, it's like, well, how's your relationship with your father? I hate him. He did this, he left me, he wasn't, whatever. So it's like, logically thinking, why would I trust another father, a heavenly father that I don't even see, if I couldn't trust the one that I could see? Right? So that's a stumbling block. And also, it's just sometimes, most people, they believe in God that come into the program, whether they're in our program or the secular one. It's a matter of they think God wrote them off and wants nothing to do with them anymore because they're the things that they were doing, the life they were leading. Or they don't really want, they'll feel led to do something by God and they don't really want to go that way. They want to still do their thing. They still want control. And that's a big stumbling block as well. So I think it's a combination of that. I think people say it all the time because most of our clients are brand new to this. Some of them are atheists, some of them are agnostic, and they're like, I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to trust, but I have a really difficult time trusting. It usually goes back to trust.
Yeah, what's that saying? Like, your best thinking got you here, you know? So it's time to give up the reins and let somebody else guide you, take suggestions, and, just have a little faith.
Absolutely. I said it this morning. I said, we're demonstrating faith every day, even driving to work.
Yeah.
Because you're trusting that person on the other side of that yellow line is going to stay there and not come into your lane. And then I was saying about trusting the chairs. And I said, it takes me more faith to trust in the chair than most people, right? Because of my size. And I actually broke one of the chairs in the group one time. And I was talking about going to the gym, and all of a sudden the chair broke. There was 3 guys that had to pull me up. It really happened. It was, so we are demonstrating faith all the time. It's just a matter of redirecting that up, vertically to God.
It's so true. We put faith in the simplest things, and we don't even realize that we're putting faith in it. So it's like just redirecting it to something that's a little bigger, obviously, and believing that it's going to help you in life. Has faith always been a part of your life?
Grew up Catholic, Northeast, had to go to church, had to be an altar boy, had to go to Catholic school, got kicked out in 6th grade. So kind of rebelled like most people do when religion is forced on them. It might have been good. I didn't really pay much attention. I didn't do anything really to get it. I just knew I didn't want to be involved with it because I was forced into it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happens when it's forced down your throat. And especially if you're young, you rebel against it. So that's basically what happened. I was away from any type of faith for probably about 24, 25 years.
Wow.
I didn't even go to CEO Christian, Christmas, Easter only, right? And that's what they call them, and that's what I was. And I really didn't even want to go then. I just would be dragged there or felt guilty if I didn't go there on Easter or Christmas Eve. So there was no relationship with God. There was nothing like that at all. It was just, I was going because I felt guilty if I didn't go.
And then eventually you got to the point where you found God on your own. And
yeah, I mean, I moved out from California. I was a director of loss prevention with a national company out there. And I ended up moving to Florida, and I went to Calvary Chapel in Fort Lauderdale. My sister brought me there. I was kind of mesmerized by the whole thing. I was like, "Where's the stained glass, windows? Where's the,
where's the altar boy?"
yeah. Where's the altar boys? And where's the guilt, really?
Yeah.
Because that's what I was used to. Where's the asking for money? They would never ask for money. They're like, "We have tithe booths in the back if you want to give." So all these things were foreign to me, and I liked it. I remember I was like hanging on every word that was said. I still remember a lot of it, and this was March 6, 2005. So at the end, they do this altar call, and I went up there, and I didn't really know what was going on and didn't understand a lot of it. But that's when I really started to get into faith and actually restore any relationship that I had with God.
Yeah. Sometimes you just have to explore and see which religion or type of church is right for you, because the one that you grew up at that you don't resonate with doesn't mean that that's the only type out there. What would a person who is not religious, what could they gain from faith?
I think that, if you look at the major religions, like you were talking about in the open, there's Christianity, there's Judaism, there's Islam, right? All of them have a high regard for Jesus. Mm-hmm. Even Islam, I studied it when I got my master's, and I was so surprised, like even in the Quran, how many times Jesus is referenced and how highly he's regarded. So even if you didn't believe that he's the Son of God and our sins are forgiven, right? If you just practice his teachings, right? And this is, again, people that come in that aren't really buying into the whole thing. But even if we just practice forgiveness, how do we get better at anything? We practice it, right? So I have a chapter in one of the books, Learning to Forgive by Practicing Forgiveness. I had to do that. It took a lot of practice because I had a lot of practice of not doing that, especially in New York City. So it's a matter of practicing and applying his principles.
So do you have to follow a certain religion to participate in the Faith and Recovery program?
Yeah, that's probably one of the best things, and people always ask that because you would think that, okay, this is a Christian-based program, so I would have to be Christian. And it's really, the vast majority are not. Mm-hmm. We get people coming, we've had Jewish clients that did phenomenal. One girl came in, she kept coming in and then leaving, and then she just came right into one of the devotionals, and she's like, I feel led here. I know my grandmother's going to freak out. I know my parents are going to be upset, but I have to be here. And she just came in, and then she wrote this beautiful letter. She was Jewish. She grew up in Judaism. So the majority of our clients are kind of either on the fence. It's basically we're trying to restore a relationship that they may once had. Mm-hmm. And there's a group of our clients that come for the faith program, and they were involved with some type of organized religion or a church, and they fell away from it in active addiction. So they're trying to restore that, mm-hmm. or they're trying to establish a relationship with God that they never had, mm-hmm. and that's a big percentage of the clients as well. So either way, I mean, they're taking a leap of faith in it, and a lot of times they will say, there's someone in there even right now that was just in the whole first few days was like, if I even hear the word God, I'm out of here. If a therapist mentioned, like that's kind of was her approach. And now she's in there, she's doing phenomenal. And I just met with her recently, and she's asking about the Bible, and I gave her all this information and a Bible. So you have these transformations that happen of the heart. They're genuine transformations of the heart. It's not just religious rule keeping, and it's not just behavior modification. I mean, these are people that I'm blown away about the change in them, and I only know them for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Imagine what they were doing a couple of months ago or years ago. So then I'd really be blown away by it. But the one that's the most important, that does know what they were doing and what they were all about and what their life was about, is God, right? And that's kind of what we tell them. That's really the one who matters. And he's telling us we're forgiven, right? If we come to him, and like a light goes on a lot of times with clients. That, like I said earlier, they think they're too far gone. They think he wrote them off, right? So there's a lot of secrecy involved with active addiction. It's not something you're like singing on the rooftops about, or yelling on the rooftops, or posting on social media. We're usually keeping things secret of what we're embarrassed and ashamed of. And active addiction and or mental health disorders definitely fall in that category.
No, I love that. There's no prerequisites. All are welcome. And we meet you where you're at and help you on your journey, wherever that takes you.
That's it.
It's just about having an open heart and an open mind.
Yeah. I mean, it says it right on all our material. And you know better than anyone. We meet people right where they're at on their spiritual journey, and they may not even have a spiritual journey. Right, and most of them don't. So it's really, it increases my faith to be able to be around this and a part of this and see this transformation take place over and over and over again. I mean, it'll be 7 years next month that we had the faith program.
Amazing.
And some of the people that, I mean, I was at a conference at Calvary Chapel on Sunday. I ran into so many people that were part of Calvary Chapel now that were in the program, and these are people that society wrote off.
Yeah.
God didn't, right? But society did. And now they're doing some really great work, and God's using them. And it's really cool to see. I must have ran into like 6 or 7 people from 2, 3, 5 years ago.
Yeah, you just continue to see them flourish.
Yeah, yeah.
Why should a person get involved with the Faith and Recovery program, and how do you believe this program is different from other ones similar to it?
I think that a lot of these programs, and there's really a lot of them aren't even around anymore, but the ones that are, they're more tracks. They're not necessarily comprehensive programs.
Yeah.
If you add all up the hours that in between the programming during the week and Saturday, and then what we do at night, like celebrate recovery and go to church on Sunday and different things, it comes out to about 39 hours a week of programming. So one, I think that what happens, and I've seen this happen, where treatment centers get calls about faith programming. And if they don't have it, I think they start to get frustrated because they're sending people away and they could be coming there. So what they do is they're like, okay, get some Bibles in here and let's get these guys to church. And yeah, we have a faith program. And they throw something together on a website. And then the people that come in there, especially from the Bible Belt, that are really serious about this, and they find out it's not a real faith program, or it's some type of new age, like weird spirituality type program. And so that's what happens. And, the Bible says God's not going to be mocked. So, we want to do things that are honoring him, and he will honor us and bless that. So I think that's what happens. I think the biggest difference is the programming and the focus. We honor biblical principles, but we're not forcing it down people's throats, because that's what they're going to rebel against and reject.
Yeah.
And that's what they're used to, and that's what they say coming in. They usually say, I don't want anything to do with this faith program. They'll say that to admissions and things like that. And then somebody comes up to them, or their roommate is in the faith program, and then they realize, wow, this isn't a judgmental, condemning program, which isn't even how Jesus taught to begin with. It more aligns with the Jewish Pharisees that he used to go off on. And then they come in and they're like pleasantly surprised, and then they start to restore that relationship, and they have hope. It's a safe place to be transparent and to open up. We try to make it where they feel comfortable to share and to open up. And a lot of times that doesn't happen because people finally get the courage to open up about stuff that they've been carrying for years, maybe their whole life. And if people are talking and laughing and walking out, they shut down.
Yeah.
It's like, see, nobody cares. I might as well not even be talking.
It's just validating their negative thoughts.
Exactly. And that happens sometimes. We really try to limit that in the program. When somebody's sharing, respect that and listen to them. And you may learn something. I learn a lot from listening to the clients. I do a devotional group in the morning. Somebody reads it, and then everybody goes around and shares, and I just comment on what they're saying. But I'm like blown away by what they're saying, the insight that they have, the experience that they have, the intelligence that they have. So when you're in active addiction, all that goes out the window.
Yeah.
It's like wasted talent. Like De Niro used to say on The Bronx Tale all the time to the kid, wasted talent, nothing worse than wasted talent. And some of the talent, the drawing, the musical talent, these things that these clients have is absolutely incredible. And they get so excited when they start to use their gifts again.
Yep.
We got a guy that draws. I'll show you a picture. He drew a picture of my dog and other pictures. It's absolutely incredible. But we waste the talent when we're in active addiction because we don't really care. We don't even care sometimes if we're around the next day. Why would we want to? And so there's a saying, our talents are God's gift to us, and when we use them, are our gift back to God. And so when we're not using them, you can feel it. And people will tell us, you're wasting your gifts. So that's part of active addiction.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I was at B-Hop yesterday doing some stuff, and we were in the cafeteria, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, one of the patients just like broke out in a song. I don't even really understand what was happening, but this one kid was singing. The other one was like beating like a drum on the table, and it was like a whole performance. It just like randomly started in the cafeteria, and it was actually really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's amazing to see people like so happy and allowing their talents to be out there and express themselves again, because Lord knows they weren't doing that a few weeks ago and they were out there ripping and running.
Yep. Exactly. And it starts to build their self-esteem.
Yeah,
And it's
absolutely.
so encouraging. And also there's like a glimmer of hope in their eyes.
Yeah.
Where there wasn't maybe a week or two before.
Sparkle.
There's like, that light goes on.
Yep.
And I love that the most about this, because it's one thing when somebody was involved with church and things like that and they come back, but what's really cool is the ones that weren't.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that were making fun of this, the ones that, a lot of times they're just curious. We'll have people come up to our program from other programs in Pompano, and they'll look in or they'll come in and then they'll leave, and then they're curious. And then they usually end up coming in. But a
Yeah.
lot of times it's from other clients telling them about it. It's like a word of mouth thing.
Yeah.
They're going to listen to them more than me saying, hey, you should come into this program, like that type of thing. So it's a really cool thing to see. There's a proverb, and it says, iron sharpens iron, one person sharpens another. And that's what goes on there. They're sharpening each other.
Yep.
And so it's so important, because you don't usually have that support system, maybe even with family or friends or people that don't understand this. They're shaming you, they're blaming you, they're shutting you down. So that's why I tell them, take advantage. When I was in treatment, I never used to take advantage of the support system. I never really opened up, and that's why I kept going back, because I would leave with the same stuff I walked in with. So when they do that and they're able to share and open up and be transparent, one, people could encourage them, and the other thing is now you have people that could hold you accountable.
Yeah.
And I never liked the accountability part. That's why I never really opened up, even at church or wherever. So I kind of would just isolate and go off on my own, and then the same thing would repeat itself.
Well, it's pretty hard to deny the unconditional love of God that you can feel in some of these groups. Being open to receiving it, you feel it. It's a totally different experience.
Oh, yeah.
So I do believe that when those ones that are curious and they're maybe a little more cynical, when they actually allow their curiosity to get the most of them, it's like, wow, I feel this. There's something here. Maybe I should come back. And then before you know it, you have a new Faith and Recovery patient.
There you go.
Why don't we talk a little bit about some of the new services that we're offering in the Faith and Recovery program really quickly?
Yeah, so we expanded our programming nationally to all Banyans at all levels of care last August. So it's a little over a year now. Basically what that looks like is telehealth, and it really kind of stemmed from the whole COVID thing.
Yeah.
At least something good came out of that, right?
Yeah, so a hybrid telehealth Faith and Recovery program.
Exactly. So we realized that, wow, we could impact other people in other locations via telehealth. So we offer groups, we offer individual faith counseling, and also alumni groups and special events like Palm Sunday and Good Friday and things like that. We have one coming up for Thanksgiving. We do a Veterans Day service. So it's really good, because there's been people, we've had 23 clients from other locations, Texas, Massachusetts, a lot from BHOP, that actually were on there, and they're like, hey, I'm going to some IOP somewhere. I'd rather go to this program. And they'd actually either extend their stay or transfer to the faith program.
Amazing.
So they wouldn't have been there if they weren't on that. So it's a really cool thing. So we have the national programming, we have the actual program in Pompano Beach, Florida, and South Florida. We've had that, it'll be 7 years coming up on. And again, clients come from all over the country, and some of them are, were in the church or whatever, and they lost that, they want to get back to it. And then there's a lot of them that are just brand new to this whole thing. So we have 2 therapists there. It's an integration of faith and clinical. So there is clinical groups in this programming. It's non-denominational. And, so the clinical piece is good too, because they really need both.
Yeah.
And it works well together. So that's kind of what the programming is. It's the national on telehealth, and then it's the actual physical program in Pompano Beach, Florida, non-denominational Christian-based program. But they could come from any faith background or no faith background.
Right. What would you say to somebody who was looking for help?
I mean, I would say that there's always hope. God doesn't make junk, and he doesn't give up on anyone. And people may. Mm-hmm. I still have people that don't talk to me from Connecticut and New York and stuff like that. And it's probably better that they don't, because they're still drinking and gambling and doing all this stuff that almost destroyed me. But God does not give up on anyone. He still loves them, right, with an unconditional love like we spoke about. That doesn't change. He still has a plan for them, and he's going to use all those bad choices and all that hurt and all that pain for good. right? That's like the raw material that he uses. He'll use us. He works all things together for good. So when you look at it like that, he still has a plan. He still has a purpose. We might not understand it. We don't know. We don't need to know all the details of his plan. We just have to trust. It goes back to that trust word, that he has a plan. And the details will make sense as we go forward, right? We live our life forward. We understand it looking backward, right? It's not a Bible verse, but I like that saying because it makes sense. Because I didn't understand any of the pain I was going through, and I blamed God for most of it. But I was operating outside of his will. I was in a state of unforgiveness, and that was the core issue, and he's telling me to forgive. So don't lose hope, and all the things that you've gone through, he'll use those things. I pull from those experiences all the time. I wouldn't have anything to pull from or even talk about or write about if I didn't go through this stuff. So look at it like that. I think that's the main thing. Don't lose hope.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Anthony.
Thank you. This is great. And I think you're doing amazing work with this. Like I said, I was listening to some of your previous shows, and I had to keep rewinding because I was like, this is amazing. You sound incredible. So you're doing great work, and keep it up. And thank you so much for having me on.
Of course. Thank you so much for being on, and I'm excited for people to learn more about this topic. Well, we hope you enjoyed today's episode. Remember that growth and recovery are possible, and it can all start today. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Banyan Treatment Centers, and make sure you're subscribing for notifications of new episodes, and please don't forget to leave us a review. You can also learn more about the Faith in Recovery program at faithinrecovery.com, as well as our Banyan website at banyancenters.com. If you or someone you know is struggling, call us at 888-515-7706. Thanks for joining us today on the Banyan Podcast.